All right, Jonathan, where would you like to start today?
Well, I'll just give an update. Our last session actually went really well. It was like the first time I was like, hey, it's working,
Yeah.
So that was pretty good.
How many sessions have you had since our last supervision?
That was before the externship, right?
I believe so. It was like a really tough session last time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was it was before the externship thing.
Yeah. It was 2 sessions. We were supposed to have a third one, but we had to cancel one of the weeks, which honestly made me feel like very worried.
Oh, because they canceled?
Yeah, because they canceled. And like I felt like it wasn't going well.
But then they booked after?
Pardon? Yeah, and then I just got in my head. Yeah.
So in that sense, that's good, because it tested that that belief, right? It sort of disproved that belief.
Yeah. So
so that was reassuring when they rebooked.
Yeah, and then we talked it out, and it was because one of the partners is like trying to set up a new business, and he just didn't have the time. So
sure,
that week, yeah.
So not what it was in your mind.
Yeah, it was like I was like, oh my goodness, I failed them. It's all going downhill. Like I'm not built for this, Like it went to very bad places very quickly.
Yeah. So you had to sit with that for a while.
Yeah.
Until they rebooked.
Right.
Yeah, you'll remember that next time. A couple cancels, because you don't do that with individuals, I don't think, right?
No, I'm like, if they have to cancel or reschedule, like I'm.
Yeah. You don't see that as you failed them.
Yeah. But I was
a couple you did.
I've been on, I think on edge with that, especially because it wasn't going well, or I felt like it wasn't going well for the first, like for those few sessions.
And it's your first couple, right?
Yeah, and it's my first couple.
Yeah. And it shows like you're really trying really hard to help them to make this work.
But they did come back, and they were talking, like we were just measuring like outcome rating, basically just looking at like frequency and intensity of arguments. And they said the frequency hasn't gone down too much, but the intensity is like drastically different. Yeah,
that's really good. And what does that mean as far as like whether they're able to catch it or repair from it, or like how are they able to come down or not get it to where it used to be?
Right. So it's like we're like firmly into that stage 2 now. So the girlfriend or the fiance, like they're engaged now, I guess, but the woman is able to sort of like check that fear that she has of that he's going to leave, and that she needs to like pursue and go. And then the way that she said it is, come what may, if he's going to leave, he's going to leave, but right now, like he's here. And then
challenging her own insecurity in the moment. She's able to notice those fears come up.
And with her partner, he used to withdraw because like he would see a problem and then try to like solve the problem in his head and like offer the solution, but every time he did that, she would get frustrated, it wouldn't land. He's used the word like breakthrough, like I could never break through. But now he's like, I realized like I'm just getting in my head, I'm just getting in my feelings. I'm just gonna like be there in the moment and also just like say what I feel, just what's in my head without like all that like metacognition going on. And so with her softening up and with him re-engaging, they've been able to like they get into that argument, but they're able to be like, hey, wait, why are we doing this again? Like, what were we actually talking about? Like,
that's amazing. Yeah.
That's
really good. Yeah, that's about the time you're a couple is like one of the indicators that a couple's ready for stage 2.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
or
did
that at
say,
least they've de-escalated at least. Yeah.
yeah, they did say though that they were, or at least he mentioned that throughout the week, he was like almost looking for when the next fight was going to happen though, because he was like, this is going like better than he's used to. And so he's
Mm.
like, this isn't normal. And he's like,
Yeah, it's hard to trust. Yeah, to
yeah,
keep that hope up, like the shoe's gonna drop around the
right.
corner. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
So it
how,
sounds like you're doing really good. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was very I was pleasantly surprised. The way that like with him, I have to like I'll ask him to like turn to his partner and like share
Mhm.
and like do those encounters. Whereas with her, oftentimes she'll just like do it without me even like we'll
Mm.
get to the point and then she'll like be like, this
She
is how
knows
I
the
feel. Yeah.
process.
She just
Yeah,
kind of like will do it. If it gets to a
that's
point,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
But with her, if it gets to a point where it's like too much, and I ask her, she'll be like, I don't know if I can yet with that. Like
Yeah.
I just don't want to
Certain
feel like I'm
things. Yeah.
beating him on the head with the same thing.
Right. She's
Right.
worried about how she comes across if it's going to trigger him because of
Right.
what she's used to. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's where we're at right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And when she's sharing, when she's turned to him on her own,
yeah.
is it pretty soft? Is it pretty vulnerable? Where how does it
Uh,
usually?
there's like a vulnerable piece, oftentimes followed by like
Yeah.
a little bit of that defense still.
Yeah. So that's the benefit of maybe setting some parameters of like,
Right.
oh, just before you share, let's just kind of
Okay. Yeah.
put it into context, and let's just make sure we're fully in our body right now as we share. That will allow her to just slow down a little bit and just kind of keep what is shared to just the vulnerable parts.
Okay.
Because as soon as it goes to the and or the but and about you, and the part that is like more of the secondary,
Yeah.
if she's starting with the vulnerable part, you can say that was perfect. That's
Okay.
it. Yeah, let's stop right there. Yeah, let's check in with you. How is that to share, right? Because then it allows him to just let in as much as possible without getting triggered himself, right?
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was I remember last time when we talked, maybe it was the time before, you're talking about like when a partner can't take it in, try to break it down between what they can hear and what they can't hear. So I've just been doing that with him, like, hey,
Yeah.
those parts, and I
Yeah.
would highlight the vulnerable parts and stuff. But that's really interesting to
Yeah. This
I need
is
to get better at like cutting my clients off, I think.
yeah, that's not an easy skill to develop, especially if like it's hard for you to especially like to argue with pursuers, right? Or to slow down a pursuer.
Yeah.
So because a withdrawer is generally slower, especially as they're very tentative when they share. So
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to rush to share. Whereas a pursuer might go vulnerable and then they'll as it gets hard, as it gets to the point at which like the fear comes up, that might get converted into some anger.
Yeah.
So you want to stop them there. And it's not about some people think if you're cutting them off, it's like you're cutting off their speech.
Mm.
But what you're really doing is cutting off the people think, even new counselors think setting a boundary around that will not land well. But what it actually does, a lot of times clients are really relieved that you cut them off because you're only cutting off the part that is secondary.
Right.
You don't cut off primary. You're just really cutting off. They don't want to be in secondary. You're almost like you're getting them off the hook in a sense where they got too frazzled. It was too vulnerable, and you're really just saying that was amazing. That's perfect, right? You just keep it at the primary,
Right.
and then it's better. It's kind of better for everyone, and we call it catching the bullet. Like there's an
Yeah.
actual term in EFT for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Um, yeah, that's something I just like thinking about it. That's something I definitely have to practice. It's like doesn't
Yeah,
come
it
naturally for
needs,
me.
just like a couple canceling on you for whatever reason. That's something that you have to practice, because
Right.
until you have enough to come back and get to find out what the real reason is, you're not, it's hard to artificially create confidence out of nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, all right. Yeah. So in this, where I'm at with the client right now, though, how would we, like, what would, I guess, what would be the next direction to go into? Because like I've worked, I was so focused on trying to de-escalate. I don't, yeah, I like came and I was like doing like my session notes, like prepping, and I was like, I don't really know where to go now.
Hmm. Hmm. That's often the point at which where we kind of transition from stage 1 to 2, right?
Yeah.
The first thing is just to assess that that is the case,
Okay.
that they're ready, right? So one of the ways to do that is, to have a session, or at least a part of a session, where you're checking in on how things have been going. It's like chapter 1 is sort of ending. Tell me about not just how the last week was, but how are we from the beginning up until now, right? Like, do they have a cohesive understanding of where they were, and are they on the same page around the growth that they both had, right? In other words, do you understand your cycle? Can you recite your cycle to me and how it
Okay.
goes and
So
how you're
instead of
able to
me
get
like
off of it?
summarizing that stuff in the beginning,
Exactly,
I
exactly.
see.
Now it's up to them to sort of show you where their understanding is,
Okay.
and it's going to come through their experience of what they've been able to do, not just ultimately it's not about what they know, it's about what they're able to apply
Right.
at home, not just in the sessions.
Right.
Yeah. Um, Ultimately, there's no way to know for sure that a couple is ready for stage 2,
Mhm.
because there's always something that comes up that like wasn't resolved.
That's fair. Yeah.
But it's more about just gauging, are they ready enough? Is there enough safety built in
Okay.
to really reach out in a way that's like a deeper vulnerability than what they have in context to their dance, right? So stage 1 is more about a particular instance.
Yeah.
Stage 2, it's a globalized piece where it's like it's not it could be so global that it's not even about this relationship. This is
Okay.
my whole life. This is my attachment system. This is how I've always been.
I see.
And that might be a new level of sharing that they've never been able to do with anyone before.
Oh, okay.
That's what creates that the deeper bond. And so that's what we call like step 5, 6, 7.
Hmm.
And we end up doing that step 5, 6, 7 with both of them. And we typically start with the withdrawer.
Okay.
In this case, with stage 1, we don't. There's no necessity to start with one or the other.
Yeah.
But in stage 2, we almost always, I think, start with the withdrawer, because the idea, at least, is that you're shoring up someone. They call it shoring up the withdrawer. In order for the pursuer to have their pursuer softening,
Yeah.
they need to see and experience their withdrawing partner come to the middle
Right.
uh, in a secure way. And then once they can be the thing that the withdrawer needed their whole life, what was missing from the withdrawer's childhood, once
Hmm.
the pursuer can be that for them. And pursuers are generally have been waiting for this their whole relationship with them. That's the other reason we start with a withdrawer. The pursuer is happy. They've always been asking for the withdrawer to be shored up.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then once the withdrawer can do that. That's usually a whole session on that, a whole even 90-minute, sometimes multiple sessions.
Okay.
Then, and it's good to have that break to see how has this new reaching impacted the relationship in between the sessions. That's sometimes really, really good to see. It could be really powerful when they've done that level of risking, gotten that level of response, and then kind of that sense of being held even, and then they go out in the world, and if there's any regression, you can deal with that next session. If there isn't, then it's like really powerful. It's like you'll get to hear really amazing stories about what transpired in between the sessions. And then you go to the pursuer and do that whole sort of dance with them, except it's from a place of softening, right? Now the journey is often different for a withdrawer than a pursuer, because ultimately you're not just learning about what it's been like this whole relationship. You're learning about what it's been like their whole life to be a withdrawer in this way, so withdrawer and pursuer, I know they're very they seem very like binary terms, right? But there can be overlap, right? And you'll get to learn about each person's unique makeup around what made them what they are. So like not all withdrawers are the same, not all pursuers are the same, right? There's commonalities, but how they arrived at that is going to be different, because their childhoods are going to be different, and their relationship with each parent might be different. The coping that they had to learn might be different. How it evolved from like childhood coping to kind of maybe relationship to relationship, it evolved in a different way until it's like where it is right now. Right. And the idea too, so if we're talking about the withdrawer, what this does is also open up the eyes of the other person, in that they see the coping now as like, for example, when a withdrawing partner is able to share in a deep way where it came from. I don't know, let's just let me think of a specific example. So let's just say my dad was really hard on me, and the only way I would get any attention is if I did really well in performance in school and sports, right? If I performed really well, I got some praise. But if I didn't perform well, or for any other thing, I would get ignored or I would get criticized, right? And so I learned to cope by, just shutting myself off from sharing anything about anything to my father, let's say in this case. And so then that maybe turned into, and of course there's gonna be an experience there of what it was like each time dad criticized me. That's its own thing. But how I learned to cope with it is, I would shut down. That protected me maybe from his words, from his actions. And so now I still do that with my relationships with you, let's say with my partner. As soon as maybe you raise your voice, I see my dad, and then I respond in the way that I did with my dad. And then it'll give the pursuer a different context. They'll have a new level of understanding.
Right, like it won't be about them.
Yeah. Like in a deeper way, because if they can be there for their withdrawing partner when they're now through that connection that's built in that moment, when they're getting upset tomorrow, let's say, and their withdrawing partner shuts down, they have like a new frame of reference of like what it's really about. It's not that they're, again, withdrawing from me, they don't care about me. It's like they're experiencing me as their dad.
Mm.
And that can really shift things, because now they're able to ask questions that are very different than what they would normally pursue with. So
Yeah.
they might say, hey, is this like what we talked about this week with Jonathan around, what it was like for you growing up?
Mm.
And then it's a different frame. And then, of course, because the pursuer was able to be there and kind of hold the withdrawer, then the withdrawer is, okay, already one, the pursuer is coming in a different way. And the withdrawer had that connection where they opened up and the pursuer was there for them.
Right.
And now that primes them a little bit to say, yeah, you know what, this is like that. And that puts the guard down. And not only does it not escalate, of course, that will prevent it from escalating, but now it's like, again, these two paths between, it's like these two doors, right? There's like the old pattern, the old door that has all these beliefs come with it.
Yeah.
And that's like the old coping. And then there's like this new door that's like fresh, it's new, it's still tentative, it's still scary, it's still hard to go through. But if there's enough awareness and enough support and enough willingness, and he goes through that new door, it can change the whole relationship and heal the childhood experience of that. And then as that happens, like the sensitivity goes down. He doesn't see her as much as a threat. Right
Mm.
now, she gets differentiated from dad.
Right.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. And of course, in exchange for each of these moments, you're creating connection. You're not just like, this bond gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and then that opens up in future sessions and in future moments the ability to go even deeper, because it's that window of
Right.
tolerance just starts to get bigger.
Right.
So if there's other trauma, other things that come up, that were like maybe impossible to talk about before, now they become possible.
Okay. Yeah. That's really interesting. That's like, yeah. That's like so big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stage 2 is big. Stage 2 is like really big. And the whole thing with stage 2 is that it can make stage 3 really easy if stage 2 is done well. Because stage 3 is essentially like coming back to problems that seemed unsolvable because they were seen on the surface, like to have kids or not have kids. It seems like this dilemma that um, that seems like there's just one answer, right?
Right.
One wants kids, one doesn't. But in reality, there might be reasons why people hold a stance, like very deep emotional reasons.
Right.
And they're also, that's one aspect. So some of that can get resolved in stage 2. Another aspect is like, maybe they do want kids, but they want the relationship to be stable enough. Okay, well, this moves towards stability.
Right.
Or internal insecurities around having kids, let's say, that could be resolved. Or what's another one? Oh, not wanting to make the other person happy in a sense because they are not feeling like that person's making them happy. Like maybe there's a real preference not to have kids,
Right.
but if they had a strong connection, they would be willing
Right.
to make the other person, very happy to have kids once they feel like their needs are also met. Right now, that could be about kids. That's just like a strong, I like that example because it's like, it seems so black and white.
Yeah.
And as you peel the layers back, it's not. But it could be anything. It could be like anything around personality traits, like I'm an active person and you're a sedentary person. And obviously, there's no such thing as one or the other, right? There's this, again, a spectrum. Or preferences for chores. or
Yeah.
preferences for how things are done. Like, I like it clean this way and I like it clean this way. So there seems to be a clear difference.
Right.
And the reason they can't talk about it is because they can't talk about things at all. And so this is just another one of those things they can't resolve.
Like,
right?
it's not the laundry isn't the issue. It's,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. There's a famous case, and I had similar one come up, but it's Sue Johnson brought this up, I believe, or she talked about it, but I remember hearing it from her, where it's a couple would fight all the time, and it was always about completely different things. And one of the times she was like, she laughed about it, and it was about one partner was criticizing the other partner about how they cut carrots. I don't like how you cut carrots, right?
Yeah.
It seems really random, right? But it could be connected to, like, I've asked, I really like it done this way. I've told you a few times. Now you're doing it purposefully. You purposefully did not hear me and are, wanting to hurt me, and that's why you're cutting it but this other way, right? So that's where it can turn. There's meaning behind it. And in general, people fight about, what I've seen is people will fight about more and more abstract things as they feel less and less safe.
Okay.
So what we fight about becomes more and more removed from what it's really about.
Right.
Seemingly on the surface.
Yeah.
Because it's safer.
Right.
Yeah. It's
Talk
much
about
harder to
carrots,
own. It's much harder to own what it's really about as we become less safe. And it evolves over time, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Unpacking those things, like, that's the goal for stage 2 then, like
Unpacking the real underlying attachment injuries. Yeah. So, and sometimes with stage 2 comes like when there's resistance for doing the stage 2 work, it's often because of attachment injuries in this relationship. So, our bodies don't even know the resistance is there until we maybe encroach on a really scary thing.
Yeah.
And then it goes, oh, they won't be there for me. And so sometimes it is because of something that happened in this relationship, like any kind of betrayal or abandonment.
Right.
So that'll be associated with it. Like, I'm taking a leap of faith. Last time I remember taking a leap of faith, you weren't there for me.
Right.
And so it's not so much about a particular fight, it's about this particular risk. So it can be something that happened in this relationship. It can also be something that happened in past relationships. Like if someone was, cheated on is a good example. That's one of the more common ones. This person never cheated on me, but in my last relationship, this person cheated on me. And ever since then, I can't talk about this level of pain. Like it could be a certain intensity of pain. It could be a certain even just level of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right. I can't even let myself love to the extent that I loved back then because I was cheated on.
Right.
And there's a block. It's like a lesson. That's its own coping of like, I will never connect again to this extent.
Right.
Because of the pain I went through. I'll never let my heart be that open again.
Right.
And so that the relationship will always hit that barrier. Nothing to do with this relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. I shouldn't say nothing. I should say the last pain or the last relationships, certain aspects get projected onto the current relationships, behavior, atmosphere, that kind of thing.
So with my client, there's like a possible attachment injury with like the phone. I don't know if you remember talking about that. But she's in like individual therapy as well, and she said she's working on like insecurities of her own. So we haven't really dove deep into that because she's like, I'm working on it with like in my individual therapy. But she did say like what she needs is like the why. of like, so he had like DM'd somebody on Instagram about like him liking how they danced or something. And she's like really stuck on the why did he do it? And
Mhm.
he doesn't really have an answer because it wasn't, in his mind, it wasn't meant to be like
Right.
him cheating or like him propositioning somebody else.
Yeah.
Um,
So do you think the why is about him, or do you think the why is about her?
I think the why is about her. And so we talked about, because she's like, why then and why, or why her and why now? And so we
So
were,
in her mind, the why is about his behavior, and getting the right response from him is going to answer the why.
yeah, that's what she thinks she needs.
That's what she thinks she needs.
Yeah. But she's like, I'm never gonna get that.
Hmm.
Um, but we talked about it a little deeper and like what that meant, and because it was like why at that moment and then why her, and so we were looking
Mm,
into both those questions. And at that
yeah.
moment there was like she had just moved off the island to the mainland. All of her family's on the island, so she was feeling a little
Hmm.
bit alone.
Hmm.
um, and um, it was like a pretty stressful move. She said she was becoming less nice, and then this person that he messaged doesn't look like her at all also, and so you have like different beauty standards that she feels like she's not meeting.
Right.
But
Beauty
then,
standards and internal like
yeah,
insecurities about looks. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
But when I sort of like push her on those ends, she just goes, no, but that's not the issue. The issue is like I need the answer
Yeah.
to the question.
So let me frame it to you this way. I think a logical exploration has its limits,
Yeah.
and sometimes it can be helpful. I think the answer to that, to the why,
Yeah.
uh, comes, generally speaking, will be answered after the healing has been done.
Okay.
And the way we get to the healing is we change the why to a what.
Sorry, can
So
you?
we change the why to a what. So by that, I mean, what was it like for you when it happened? Let's go back to that moment. Like, how would it be like right now to go back to that moment?
Mhm.
And do you have the experience that he's ever fully understood what it was like for you in that moment? Because getting the full understanding from him, meaning him hearing her pain around it, him also being moved by her pain, and being able to reflect back what it's like for him to see her pain
Mhm.
through enactments, through her enacting. So you helping her deepen, her enacting that, you checking in, how was that like to enact, you checking in with him, what it was like now for him, and then having that enacted back to her.
Mhm.
And then what was that like to see how he was moved by your sharing of your experience, right? That whole dance will often be either enough to give her that answer,
Mhm.
or at least a good, very good first step
Okay.
in healing.
Yeah.
Afterwards, you can go back and revisit, because um, when we are cheated on, the energy goes outwards to either to control and then to understand,
Right.
right? And the understanding part, I think there's good aspects to it because it's meant to prevent it from happening and hurting that way again.
Yeah.
It's like our minds want this like pattern recognition, right? Questions will generally not really ever satisfy that.
Yeah.
And I can go into a whole thing around why that is. But if we can get the healing around it, first what that does is it allows um, the belief that she has, that she holds, that came about out of that pain, about him and about the relationship and about herself, about all these insecurities that all get stirred up all at the same time.
Yeah.
They're all this very disorganized, this like trauma, which is what trauma is. It's all disorganized, it's all fragmented. And when he can give back that remorse, that real empathy in response to her pain, it challenges the beliefs she holds from that insecurity about why he did it. It also can challenge the beliefs about herself, because she's opening herself up around that, instead of, you know, even the question of why did it happen is a distant from the pain. It's like let me use my inquisitive mind to understand so that I don't have to open up. So even that opening up process is pretty important for that, because now you're touching in on what it's really about, that you just want to heal, right?
Yeah.
And this will probably be a good first step before you go to stage 2, because it will be the thing that prevents you from doing good stage 2 work.
Right.
By good, I mean like smooth, like there won't be much resistance. In order for her to feel safe, this will be helpful for her to explore.
Yeah.
And then what I would say is that once it's done, you can throw back and ask, is the why still important?
Okay, so after all that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if the answer is yes, if it's still important, it'll probably be coming from a different place. And now she'll actually be open to hearing the why.
I see.
And the why typically is like, what was the dynamic at that time, right? Like what was going on between the two of you, right? Until you do the first part, it's going to be really hard to say she's partly at fault, for example. Like she has also elements of accountability for the old dynamic.
Yeah.
It's why the cheating happened. It's why you're here in therapy. Like you're, you know, it's all part of the catalyst of what got you here. So, and you've been working on the dynamic. So the dynamic today will be different than the dynamic before.
Yeah.
And the new dynamic is essentially what's ensuring that the old dynamic doesn't come back, meaning the old coping mechanisms to deal with the old dynamics don't come back.
Right.
And for withdrawers, and this might be a place you do end up having to go to so that she can feel more reassured, is, you know, right now the answer is, oh, I didn't think it was a big deal, right?
Yeah, so we did a little bit of like an encounter like that, and he was saying he didn't realize that. He thought they were still happy back then. Like he thought like, oh, I made a mistake, I owned up to it, and he thought that was okay.
He didn't realize the level of depth that hurt her.
Yeah, and you know, when he heard that she doesn't want to like keep beating him up with it, he was like, she's not beating me up with it, she's like beating herself up with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what trauma does, is it's like an involuntary response to stimuli. Any stimuli that's associated with the pain, that particular pain. So anything that could indicate that he's cheating again, or right, that kind of thing. So or even it could be like him on his phone, or him looking away, or him just being distracted. It could be anything. It could be anything. Yeah. So and those will come up until this healing is done. Right. So that's why it's important to go into the pain.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing is, all of this will come into the narrative that they end up kind of leaving with, or that's being developed. You know, we were at this point we were engaging in this way. This is what happened. It created a rift. It made things worse. We came to therapy. We started improving. It's an important narrative for them to share.
Right.
Like how they write the story so that they understand it together in the same way.
Right.
from the perspective of this is us as a collective. This is not what was happening for you versus what was happening for me.
Right.
Although, of course, that's part of it. I think oftentimes, even in his part where he goes, I didn't think it was a big deal. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. That may not be completely right. He might have had some kind of awareness that this could hurt her.
Wrong, or...
Either something was wrong, or that maybe things are good, but some of my needs aren't met, and I'm going to get this kind of need met through other means. It could have also been like in the middle of a fight, or in the middle of just not being very connected.
Right.
And this also may be a new vulnerability that for her would be helpful to hear, that like, oh, when he's disconnected, one of the ways he learned to cope growing up might be to connect to other people, maybe women. And what that's about is about maybe being seen, or whatever it is about for him. If you're not heard, if you're not seen. So withdrawers, typically it's really hard for them to open up. And if they do open up and they get rejected for it, they close back up. The need of wanting to connect or to be heard does not close. It's still an important need.
Right.
But if they don't feel like they can go to their partner, then they might go to other ways, other means to get those needs. They might just go to friends, but they might go to things outside the relationship to get those needs met, right? Yeah. Or it could be, right, like, so generally it's the pursuers that want the lack the connection. They both sides need connection equally. Pursuers have the insecurity of not feeling lovable, so they are anxious when they're not feeling lovable, so they reach to the relationship in order to get validation. It's the way in which they connect. It's the way in which they reach out. Withdrawers also, like I said, have the same need, but they'll reach out in a different way. So some withdrawers feel safer to reach out just for sex. Some withdrawals will reach out to talk about things that don't seemingly feel like it's about the relationship. Like maybe they're talking about their day, or maybe they're talking about sports or something.
Right.
And it's still important around being heard.
Right.
But also pursuers can do that too. Like they'll talk about, you didn't do the dishes last night, and it's still about connection, but it doesn't sound like it is.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably a good place to start, is around that trauma, is to talk about it, because it's come up a few times.
Yeah. Right. Last week when we did, so that was like 2 weeks ago when we talked about the that phone thing a little bit more and had that enactment. But
and how deep did she get as far as her experience of what that was like for her?
It was like pretty vulnerable. She was able to talk about like she got to this point where she's like, I feel like I'm less than these other girls,
right?
To like my partner, and it was like really hard for her to.
That was the deepest she got.
Yeah, it was.
So that's still coping though.
Yeah.
What that is she's telling you how she copes with that distress. She compares. Now, what is it actually like? So all you have to do really is to keep going with this. Like, what's it like to compare? Right. And in that moment, what was it like to compare, and to have that be confronted in that moment? Your partner reached out to one of these women that you're comparing yourself to.
How much do you push? I guess is my question.
I don't think it's pushing.
Okay.
I think what it is, you want to watch what they're comfortable with, but until you get some kind of resistance,
right? Okay.
Then you'll never know.
Right.
And resistance doesn't mean stop. What resistance means is like, oh, this is really hard for you to talk about.
Okay.
That's all it is.
Right.
And then you talk about the fear of talking about it, and you sit there.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing about it being afraid doesn't mean they're not ready. It just means they're bracing themselves for a negative response from their partner.
Mhm.
If it was just you and her, maybe she can go deeper.
Right.
But remember, this is her partner right there.
Yeah.
And there's an awareness around how he's responding, even if she's talking to you.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're just trying to find the deepest level that she's comfortable to be able to share with you.
Right.
And then what's the deepest she's able to turn and share with him. So did you, even if you got there and you noticed this is hard for you to talk about, can you talk about how hard this is right now? We're not back in that moment anymore. We're just like, what's happening right now?
Right. So you just take them out
And
for a second.
well, I look at it more as like taking them in a sense, staying with their fear.
Okay.
It's like stay with what's coming up. So if it's hard, you don't back out. You just go, oh, I've hit the limit for right now. Let's
Mhm.
stay here in the limit.
Okay. I
That's
see.
all.
I
You
see.
don't zoom. You don't go, oh, I hit too far. You go, oh, let's sit here and get comfortable here.
Right. I
This is
see.
where
Okay.
they're at.
I think
Yeah,
that was the problem
yeah,
that I was like
yeah.
that's like the way that I was thinking about it. I'm like, oh,
Right.
I feel like I'm like going too fast or too far.
Yeah.
And I would
Fear is like a good place because it means you've gotten somewhere important,
yeah.
and you sit there and you just help them get comfortable there. How hard this is to talk about, maybe sadness will come with it, but like, can you share with them how hard this is for you to talk about, this time? And if the thing is, if you get a good response, you always want to harness the partner that's willing to be there. If you get a good response, then the fear goes down.
Right.
That's the idea.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a really good like change in understanding of how I was looking at it.
Yeah. And remember, what is the fear of? If you ask her, the fear
And
comes from her anticipating a negative response from him,
right.
generally speaking.
Right.
And if she gets a good response, a reassuring one, a comforting one that says, hey, I'm here for this. Like, you can share this with me.
Yeah.
The fear goes down, and then you can go back. Hey, what's that like to hear? Yeah, it brings the fear down. Does that make it easier now to connect with that? Can you go back there? Can you, again, let's go back to that moment. He texted the girl and you were comparing yourself to this other girl. I'm not good enough. What's coming up for you right now? Yeah.
Okay.
And you bring it into the now. It's like that moment that happened a year ago or whenever it was is now here and now.
Yeah.
You bring it back to now because it's still alive. It's not healed.
Right.
It's not hard for people with trauma to feel their trauma.
Yeah.
It's always there.
Would we with this couple, I know you said normally in like stage 2 you work with the withdrawal first, but with
Mhm.
this couple, would we just be focusing on the attachment injury first before we go into that stage 2 work?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so this wouldn't be stage 2 yet. It would just be attachment
Like
injury.
right before.
Attachment injury you can do anytime.
Okay.
Sometimes I started in the first session because the
It's
cheating happened this week and
right.
it's alive, and you have to follow what's alive right now in the room.
Okay.
And
That makes sense.
not doing that can actually create a disruption because it's like their attachment is screaming, deal with this right now.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's important. It's important to
Okay.
deal with it, if that's what they're bringing to the table. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's a lot. That's
Yeah.
like a lot of the big stuff. So I'm just trying to consolidate right now. But
Of course. I think you're doing great. You're getting to that point where like they've already de-escalated, and now the only thing stopping them from hitting the real safety to open up in a deep way
yeah.
is this incident that happened. And of course, the longer a relationship has been alive for, the more of these moments there are.
Yeah.
And they're not all trauma, but if one gets to that point where it's this like big attachment injury, it's not forgotten about until there's like real understanding.
Right. Okay.
And that means like real remorse, and that means real sharing. The other side can't understand if the side that was hurt can't really share that hurt.
Right.
And of course, it totally makes sense why a person that was hurt will protect the hurt from the person that did the hurting.
Yes. Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
But also the only way to heal is to actually expose yourself.
Right. Okay.
And if they don't, then yeah, people have creative ways of coping.
Yeah.
They stay in the relationship and then they are just in a survival coping sometimes stance for many years, and it never changes until you know there's an intervention, or until they break up, or it just doesn't, and then they just stay unhappy for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, you know, there's you know, you can think of relationships where people have been together for like 50, 60 years, just accepted that it's, you know, not an ideal relationship, and if there's a survival reason to stay, like they just can't afford to break up, or they're the kids or whatever, then yeah, the people will stay in unhappy marriages for forever. Very sad.
Yeah.
I've worked with like people in their 80s and like they just have never been able to talk to each other until now.
Wow. I mean, that's good for them though, for coming to couples counseling at 80. That's
Yeah, it was about 6 months ago. It's like only four sessions. That's all they needed. They took it from there.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot again.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of information that I need to.
Yeah. I'll stop the recording here, and we can just continue to talk for a second here.